What's going on, Tamers? It's me, Guy, entering his 2023 beard growing arc. My apologies for looking inevitably homeless for the next 2 or 3 months, guys. But we're not here to talk about my facial hair. We are actually entering the 10th week of the BT13 versus Royal Knight sets, and on top of that, we're also entering the 2nd week of events that we have with the new training cards introduced to the game. If you don't know what I'm talking about when I mention these new training cards, then definitely take a look at the video that I did detailing all the info you're ever going to need to know about these cards and more. So piggybacking off of that, it seems like the themes from this week and last week have definitely changed. Where last week it felt like people were trying out the new promo cards and the new training cards with some of the decks that weren't as popular beforehand. It seems like now people are taking some of those really strong training cards and adding to the decks that are already known to be very strong, things like Shine Greymon, Beelzebub, and more. On top of all that, last week also featured some of the first large-scale events that featured the new training and new promo cards, as well as Mulligan. These two things combined make for some really exciting results that I don't think anybody could have predicted. With that said, let's take a look at some of the event results, a few key takeaways, as well as a closer look at some of the decks that topped over the course of the past week. So before I actually talk about today's results, I want to mention that last week I said that the event results were about half of what I normally see over here in Asia, and I wasn't really sure why that was the case. And so when I went to take a look this week, it was almost the same thing. I said, okay, well, that seems a little strange. So I went and took a look on Twitter myself, and using some of the advanced search features that Twitter provides on the site natively, I found at least like 10 events that just weren't featured on this website. So now I'm in this weird place where I might just build up my own application to actually pull these event results, because it feels like I can't really trust those websites to aggregate data correctly anymore. So actually talking about the results, in my training card video, I talked about the power that blue and black were going to receive as a result of these new training cards. But what I didn't expect to see was red bringing Black War Greymon back to the forefront here. And again, taking a look at the results here, they do not lie. Black War Greymon back at the top here, towering over Shine Greymon and Beelzebubmon for the first time in a long time since its restrictions updated. When you really pause to think about it, it makes perfect sense. Greymon X Antibody allows you to go from your level 4 to level 5 for just one memory. And technically, the red training card does the exact same thing, with the added bonus of being able to search a little bit more off of 2 cards instead of just the 1 card Digivolve, right? And of these results, one of them was a very, very large-scale size event over here in Japan that featured 71 people, and the winner was a really, really aggressively focused Greymon build. It almost harkens back to the days of Agumon when that deck was so strong, and they have used the training cards in addition to the cheap Digivolution cost of all the Greymon and Agumon cards to create something truly spectacular. So if you're looking forward to that deck, definitely keep watching. And then just below that, we see Beelzebubmon still doing well. I think that in the comments the past couple weeks, a lot of you guys have been like, Beelzebubmon not really getting that many results anymore? Kind of seems weird. No. People in Japan think Beelzebubmon is one of the top 3 decks, if not one of the top 2 decks in the game right now. So don't worry, this deck is strong. What I didn't expect though is that I didn't think that you could use the new purple Wisdom training card in this deck, because typically you're just going to be milling a bunch of cards, and there are better options that actually get the effects off of mill. But I was completely wrong here. Looking at the event results, it feels like the decks that featured Beelzebubmon also had like 2 to 4 copies of the Wisdom training in them. Just another case to show off how good of a staple card these new training cards are. And then alongside Beelzebubmon, Shine Greymon, they're strong as ever. I had never thought that they would be using the training cards themselves in the Shine Greymon list, but it seems like the yellow and the red training cards just fit in perfectly because the deck is 2 colors, you can just add in either one or both. And then continuing a strong march in the meta, Blue Flare is just a deck to be reckoned with. I think that people's opinion of this deck has only gotten better as time goes on, and so if you're holding on to Blue Flare cards, hold on to them a little bit longer because they're going to pay off in dividends and in spades over here in BT13. And then also, we talked about this during the training card video as well, but Chaosdrom Nugindramon see a big buff not only from the new training card, but also from the new Raremon promotion card that just dropped as well, allowing the deck to dig a little bit faster than it normally could in the past. Moving now to the rookie level here, we see Mirage Galgamon, a deck that also got a big buff from the new training cards, as well as Royal Knights and Alphamon alongside them. Another quality over quantity moment here, where it only shows that Mirage Galgamon got 2 or 3 wins here. What this doesn't show is that Mirage Galgamon won a 50-man event over the course of last week. And it really feels like the players' perception of Mirage Galgamon have risen over the past couple of weeks. Like Ulforce Vidramon, this deck focuses on using Tamers to make multiple attacks over the course of a single turn, and so the new training cards being able to pull Tamers is great for this deck. And then rounding out the results here in the in-training level, we've got plenty of decks that we've seen before, things like Belphemon, Bloomlord, Dark Knight, Dorbeckmon, OTK. I actually saw this deck yesterday at a local that I went to, and it's really cool to see. Dorbeckmon just coming out and like punching you for 4 or 5 security is probably one of the funniest things I've ever seen. Probably one of the funniest things to me is when Dorbeckmon players take their deck and they make it look like it's something else, like an Agumon deck, like a Shine Greymon deck, and then suddenly out of nowhere, in one turn, they just bust out their Dorbeckmon, blow up swing on their opponent's side of the board, and just punch them for like 3 or 4 security. And then decks that we've just seen before in the past, things like Examon, Gallantmon, a deck that I am very in love with right now in BT13, as well as Imperial Dramon. Jesmon is really cool as well. I posted up last week a player, I think it was a Korean player, or a Japanese player, I believe it was a Korean player, posted up a way that Jessamon can get an OTK, and it's actually not that difficult to achieve. And so if you're interested in that, definitely take a look at my Twitter as well. And then Kentarosmon, a deck that, while not being the strongest one introduced in BT13, is definitely one of the more consistent ones I've seen every single week here in the in-training level. Things like Mastamon have also popped up, as well as Minervamon and Mervamon. The list that I saw was a little bit more control-focused, it seemed like, which is an interesting take on the deck, whereas before, I thought it was only kind of like a combo deck that you could use in one way. It seems like people are using other cards like Ruin Mode, as well as a few options to make the deck a bit more robust. And then rounding out our list, we see Red Hybrid. Black Purple Imperialdramon was a pretty interesting surprise to me. Rosemon, Venusmon as well, Crossheart Hunters, and then Old Force Vitramon. So, taking a close look at some of the decks at top last week, the first one I want to focus on is going to be this Greymon list that won a 71 mana event. This deck harkens back to a time of things like Agumon, or the Agumon Bond of Courage decks that were really aggressively focused on the lower end, with some of the bigger end cards being able to deal burst damage. And Black Greymon fills that role here. Where Agumon Bond of Courage was a deck that could often brick because of card draw or being able to get enough memory to make your plays, this isn't the case with these new Agumon and Greymon cards. Almost all the Agumon cards here allow you to search out the Greymon cards in the deck, and then all the Greymon cards here are pretty cheap costs for level 4. You've got the 1 cost Greymon here, the 0 cost for the X antibodies, and then this Greymon, while being able to play a tamer, doesn't really suit this deck very well because it only uses the white Cool Boy tamer and no Tide tamers. The plus 1000 is actually going to be kind of useful if you do go higher than this. Metal Greymon is a fantastic choice if you need to Digivolve something big in your way, things like Chaosdramon or Mugindramon. And then Chimeramon here being able to DNA Digivolve from 2 stacks separately means that whenever you do get to your Black Greymon, it's going to be able to make tons of security attacks becoming active whenever you Digiburst 2 cards. So the offense for this deck here is readily apparent. And you're probably wondering, well, do they have enough resource like card draw to not brick or memory to actually get this off really quickly? The answer to that is yes. 4 copies of Cool Boy, 4 copies of Red Memory Boost, 4 copies of Offense Training, and then on top of that, 0 cost cards like Gravity Crush as well as Holy Light Ray. I think it's Holy Light Bullet? I think it's Holy Light Ray. Yeah. It means that this deck is going to have the extended knees to close out the game on that turn rather than having to wait another turn if they don't have enough resources. So all in all, a very, very interesting build here, and the fact that it won a 71-man tournament means that it's definitely no slouch either. The next deck we're going to take a look at is going to be this Mirage Galgamon list that won a 52-man event last week. What I really like about this deck is that it speaks to how strong the inclusion of the new Mental Training card really is. The deck lineup itself hasn't really changed that much. They just swapped out the Blue Memory Boost for the Mental Training card, and that has pretty much done the trick. You'll notice that this deck does run a few less level 5s than you would normally see at only 7 copies. I think 8 is pretty standard right now, but with the addition of the new Mulligan rule, it feels like you can kind of skirt this a little bit. And because this deck is so draw focused, it feels like if you have a good opening hand, you can make up the difference by finding level 5 using some of the draw potential of the deck. Outside of the normal Galgamon package, we also see the nice little new tech card here of Shakomon, where this was typically only really useful against Hunter decks because Hunter use their tamers to reduce their Digivolve cost for things like their Superior mode. Now, with so many of these training cards running around, Shakomon becomes way more useful. He basically becomes a counter card for every deck that has any training cards in it at all. And the last list we're going to take a look at is going to be one of the new Beelzemon lists that actually include the new training cards, the Wisdom Training card for purple. Also, I just gotta say, this is probably the most cursed way to show off a deck list. I can barely see what some of these cards are, but you know what? I did the research, so I'm going to power through for you folks so you guys don't have to. Just kind of going from top to bottom here, we've got 4 copies of the starter deck, or the advanced Beelzemon deck, Impmon here, as well as 4 copies of the EX2 Impmon. I think in the Beelzemon advanced deck, these cards are just added, like 2 copies of these cards are just added in, so if you get 2 advanced decks, then you basically get all you need here. On top of that, we've got the BT6, I think it is, Impmon, who allows you to discard a card and then grab a level 7 or level 6 of this deck from the trash, add it to your hand. And then, of course, 4 copies of the Impmon X Antibody. Moving on to level 4, here we've got 4 copies of Wizardmon, who allows you to gain a memory whenever he's discarded off the top of the deck, as well as 4 copies of Wizardmon X Antibody, and then 2 copies of Witchmon here. We've also got 3 copies of the Iron Makoto Tamer here, and then moving on to our level 5s, we've got 3 copies of Balmon and 3 copies of Balmon X Antibody. What's really nice about this list, especially when you get to the level 6s, is that if you don't have 4 copies of those highly coveted EX2 Beelzebubmons, then it's actually okay. This deck only runs 2 copies of the EX2 Beelzemon. Alongside it, it's got 2 copies of the starter deck Beelzemon, which makes this deck lineup a little bit more wallet friendly. And then finishing up the Digimon, we've got 2 copies of the Beelzebubmon X Antibody right here, and then 1 copy of the Beelzebubmon Blast Mode. And then the options for this deck are pretty normal for what you expect to see for this deck. 4 copies of Deathslinger, 3 copies of Rival Barrage. What is different though here is they're going to have 2 copies of the Purple Memory Boost or the Violet Memory Boost, and then 2 copies of the Training card, the Wisdom Training card here. Again, I've seen the Wisdom Training card splits anywhere between 2 and 4 for this deck within the past week. So yeah, if you want to try it out with 2, 3, or 4 cards, definitely give it a shot and let me know in the comments below. So that is going to wrap up the 10th week of the BT13 versus Royal Knight sets events over here in Japan and Asia. I don't know about you folks, but I'm having a ton of fun experimenting with these new training cards and the kind of wacky decks we can make with them. For example, just taking a look at the Greymon deck list that we saw that was really hyper aggressive, I wonder if it's possible to build something for Gabumon using the same idea. And let me know what kind of wacky decks you guys are interested in cooking up using some of these new training cards once you get your hands on them. Also, again, if you have any questions about anything that we talked about today or didn't talk about today, feel free to put those in the comments below as well. I'm always trying to answer those as soon as possible. Anyways, folks, I'm gonna get out of here. Before you get out of here, do me a favor, hit the subscribe button, and I'll catch you in the next one. Take care.